when you on the conveyor belt all this rock comes out, then it figures out the total number of rocks based on the weight and the speed and things, but it's all automated again. So a company makes that machine, and then there's other companies that do the security for it, other companies that do like the auditing for it, and so it all relates to that. So there's a lot of spin-off jobs, I think, particularly in Northern Ontario, but I think even you look in Toronto, there's probably all kinds of people employed in administration, executives, that kind of thing related to mining. So yeah, no, it's a big deal, and I think it's a really major part of our economy, and something, maybe as a government we don't, well, actually we do, and I think because of the green transition, it now has become a kind of a central platform for our government, trying to assist in that green transition, so to making, for example, electric batteries, but you need chromium to make galvanized steel. You need nickel to make, I think, galvanized steel, and those go into turbines. So it has, and I think in the past, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, as a federal government, you might say there's not a lot of involvement or a lot of interest. But I think with critical minerals, it's really changed. So.
Well, and the point has been put on the end of the spear by saying we're not going to have fossil fuel burning vehicles within the next decade or so. So that in and of itself has created a sense of urgency, whether it's artificial or not doesn't really matter anymore.
Well, yeah. So I think there's two things, and certainly climate change and okay, maybe it was El Nino this year, but this is in Thunder Bay, like the outdoor rinks basically weren't open almost the whole winter because it was too warm, and that's never happened in my life. This was the first Christmas ever in Thunder Bay that wasn't a white Christmas. There was no snow. And certainly you look around the world and the number of climate-related disasters, whether it's fires or flooding or big storms, it certainly seems to be getting a lot worse, and certainly that's what the experts say. So, I mean, the green transition is fueled by that, by climate change. But then also, I think the geopolitical situation where, we don't want to be dependent on the Russians or the Chinese, and for good reasons. And so we don't want to have to get our lithium for our batteries from China, and their lithium is very dirty. So, I mean, they refine the lithium using electricity generated from coal power plants, right? So I mean, and when you hear people say, well, if you actually look at the carbon footprint of an electric vehicle versus a gas burning vehicle, and they say, well, it's actually not that different, because when you calculate you make the electric battery, but it costs so much and produces so much pollution to do it. Well, that's if you get your lithium from China, but if you get it from Canada, cleaner lithium, then it makes a lot more sense. And apparently that's kind of the way the world's going. That companies not only look at you make lithium, but how green are you in making the lithium? So
yes, and then that's a much broader peripheral view of how we're going to have to tackle this problem. And here's where I have a challenge with the political discussion of this, is that we want to put it into one lane or another. For example, to be able to say we are going to eliminate fossil fuel burning vehicles because we're going to go to the EV, and the lithium that comes from China is dirtier than it is wherever else we might acquire it. That is a very specific and tight lane to talk about our overall environment strategy, first of all. And, lest we get into the whole question around the carbon tax. But there are ways, to me, that we can be attacking and, really doing important work in mitigating climate change that has nothing to do with the carbon tax. Yeah. And I want to know where that conversation is for the federal Liberals.
Well, no, I think the carbon tax, and it wasn't actually the Liberals that made it.
That's not the point. That's not the point.
No, but
you understand. Right now, we live where it is.
But because a certain individual in a certain party likes to harp on about the carbon tax, but it's only one part.
I got news for
solution.
you. He's not the only one harping. People I talk to just generally look at that and say it's being added to and it's a cost of living issue. My point is not about arguing with the carbon tax. No. My point is to say that the solution to the carbon or the environment is not just carbon tax. And in fact, I think it's a very blunt instrument that's not very effective, because it hasn't stopped me from driving my car.
Well, I think, though, a lot of, even conservative economists believe that the carbon tax is one of the most efficient ways of trying to get people to decrease their greenhouse gas emissions. But I mean, it is only one of many ways, and I think, and for example, like another thing which you wouldn't have thought was a big environmental issue related to greenhouse gases is the amount of wasted food.
Yeah.
So as people say, like the refrigerator is a place for your food to go to die, right? And so we all you go to the grocery store and you buy all this stuff and you end up throwing out a lot of stuff because you don't use it, right? But if you actually calculate the amount of greenhouse gases that were created by the fact that, okay, you grow the lettuce, you have to transport it, there's all these costs and all this fuel burned in the process, and then you just throw it out. So, I mean, there are, and if you look at, I think, globally, the causes of greenhouse gas emissions, like trying to get people to waste less food, you wouldn't have thought that was an important way of dealing with global warming, but in fact, it turns out that it is. So
are you teeing up a carbon tax on my head of lettuce? Is that what you're
on your refrigerator?